So my name is Sam Hartmann. I'm the Vice President Exploration at F3 Uranium Corp. We're a uranium explorer in the Athabasca Basin, Saskatchewan. Currently, we're focused on the Patterson Lake North project, where we discovered a high-grade, what we call the JR zone, in the fall of 2022. We're drilling out that zone and currently still exploring and looking for the next zone.
Sam, lovely to meet you. Obviously, we've been talking with Dev previously. Nice to see other members of the team. What's your background? VP of Exploration. Where have you been? What have you done before?
VP Exploration. So I've been involved in uranium since 2012. I joined originally the F1, which is Fission Energy Corp, when we were developing the J Zone at Waterbury Lake project on the east side of the basin. Shortly after I joined there, that got bought out by Denison. And then we went on to make the discovery at Patterson Lake South, which is what became the R deposit. So I was involved in that, and I was with Fission Uranium Corp from that time until 2023, spring of 23.
Right.
We had a partnership there at the project R with Alpha Minerals. We ended up buying them out, and in that process, we spun out Fission 3.0 Corp. And that was the basket with all of the exploration properties in it, including the Patterson Lake North project. So that was 2013. So from that point onwards, we sort of jointly managed the two companies, Fission Uranium Corp with a single asset, which is the PLS property, and then all of the exploration properties in Fission 3.0. And so I've been involved in both companies since their inception.
Right. And obviously Denison's still involved. They put $15 million in last October. So they fancy your chances of making additional discoveries. I guess that's your brief. So how are you going about it?
That is right. There was a lot of what I saw right away after the discovery of the JR zone. There's a lot more immediate initial interest from the big players than we saw 10 years ago. So Denison came in right away and they came to site and we shared our data and everything, and then they were interested enough to continue on with this funding.
Right. Okay. But tell me how you're going to go about it, right? Because I think, and hopefully we'll talk about it today, is the F4 spin out is where you're going to kind of package up 17 or so assets into that company. And that'll be a spin out for the benefit of F3 shareholders. And we'll talk about it in a second. But in terms of what's left and therefore what you've got to focus on, what you've been given money to do and what you've been challenged to do, can you tell me a bit more about that?
We made this discovery. We've been drilling it off, and we still are drilling some holes in there. Ultimately, what the market and us as a company is looking forwards to is to find another deposit or another zone. Typically, what we see in these uranium deposits is that they occur in clusters, often along strike. You see that at R. R has several zones itself, and then you have Arrow about 7 kilometers along strike, and then Spitfire. And what we're looking for is sort of building on that geological theory and finding that same thing at PLN. So the focus really is on finding another zone. And that's what shareholders are after. That's what we're after. And we still see signs everywhere where we're drilling of us being close to something big.
Right. But let's get into detail today. You're definitely the guy to talk about it, right? So obviously back in June, you hit 31% over 2 meters. There's some high grade stuff going on there, but it's what are those signs? What are you chasing? How do you allocate resources in terms of you got to, it's all about the most efficient use of capital, right? Mm-hmm. You got to get that over the line. So what does that look like?
Well, that's the difficult thing in uranium exploration is that these deposits are very focused. If you look at other deposit types like porphyries, they have these big increasing halos around them. Uranium deposits really don't have that. Like for instance, what we see at the JR zone, you have ultra high grades, you have up to 60% grades. You step 30 meters outside of the zone and there's not even a trace level of uranium there, right? So what you need to do is break it down to what size of zone or deposit are you looking for? And ultimately, it comes down to just a numerical breakdown of where do we have gaps along our structures that are still big enough to accommodate something at least the size of JR zone. So on the what we call the A1 conductor or the A1 shear zone, that's what's hosting the JR zone. Ultimately, what we've done is gone in and drilled it to a density where you can't miss something if it's 100 meters long or smaller, right?
So this is kind of you've got to be quite systematic about this, which I guess in some way must be quite frustrating.
Yeah.
Certainly in terms of the cost of the drill bit. So in terms of like the kind of the work on the ground, as it were, again, what are the most efficient ways of actually getting these sort of signals or signatures that you're looking for? And how do you allocate those resources in terms of the team and the type of work that they're doing?
That is exactly the number one challenge in uranium exploration. I mean, we start big. We start with usually airborne geophysics. We narrow that down with ground geophysics, which will give you a little bit more precise modeling. At the end of the day, the geophysics, you can only take it so far. And in the Athabasca Basin, we have a lot of cover, usually sandstone. And then on top of that, you have what we call overburden, which is the quaternary sand and gravel deposits from the last ice age. So we can never see, in the Athabasca Basin, you can never actually see bedrock. You're only interpreting what it is from drilling. And yeah, you're right. I don't know if frustrating is the right word because it's just the nature of the game. And that's what makes uranium exploration so unique, though.
I thought you were going to say fun.
It is. It's one of those things because in uranium exploration, we probe the drill holes. The mineralization we're looking for is radioactive, so it's very easy to get an immediate sense of what you have. So with every drill hole, you get this, instant gratification or instant disappointment or somewhere anywhere in between. It's not like gold exploration where you send your assays in and then you wait a few months and then you kind of see what you found, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then how does it work in the basin with regards to, depending on the seasonality of it, at points you've got ice, snow, and then water.
So generally in the basin is the winter season is where most people are active. The basin is quite flat, so you have a lot of swamp and lakes and all kinds of water bodies in there. So typically exploration is done in the winter time when everything's frozen, because you have access to basically anywhere. In the summertime, you're limited to the areas that are high and dry, which we're fortunate enough to have at PLN. Basically everything we're drilling so far is on land, which is why we've been able to go year round with drilling.
Right. Okay. And outside of PLN, what are the other kind of focuses for you?
So we have another project that we're drilling right now. It's called Clearwater West. That has a JV on it. That is a property that will be spun out into F4. So that's about 20 some. It's just south of Triple R, and it's the same thing. It's a property just outside of the basin. And we're looking for the same thing, basement hosted, structurally controlled uranium.
Right. It might be time to kind of leap on to, because I think we keep touching on it, which is this spin out of F4 and this kind of portfolio of exploration assets. So where are we in the process? Let's start with that one.
We're quite close in the process. So the final court date for that, I think, is August 15th. And so on August 18th, if you have, registered F3 shares, you will receive F4 shares on your F3 share basis. It's going to be a 1-to-1, and we're doing a 10-to-1 rollback at the same time. So effectively, you will get 1/10 of a share in F4, as you are holding in F3. So on the day when F4 becomes trading, in that moment in time, it'll have the exact same ownership as F3 currently has.
Right. Okay. And let's get into the business plan and the rationale for why. So why is it important now to spin out of F3 and put it into a separate vehicle?
It's very much the same reason as we did it 10 years ago with Fission 3.0. It's to isolate your crown jewel asset, which for us is Patterson Lake North. We want F3 to be valued solely on that property. what happens is that when you have all these peripheral exploration properties, you end up getting no value for them. And that is why we're spinning them out. And we'll be able to give them more attention. And that way we can have fresh money coming in as well, back into a fresh corp that has fairly tight share structure. And it's an opportunity for shareholders to get back in on the bottom.
Right. Okay. So, and let's look at what fresh money looks like. And I guess you're referring to, example, Murphy Lake with gold camps there. Maybe explain that model to people.
So Murphy Lake is one of our better properties in F4. We've signed a deal with Canadian Gold Camps, and it's a 3-year option. They can earn up to 70% interest in the property. Year 1 and year 2 spends will be $5 million each. So really, it's a $10 million earn-in for 50% with an option for 70. So that'll allow us to sort of stay engaged in F4 and have immediate funding on one of the best properties starting this summer or early fall.
Right, and that's I think total potential spend up to 70% of 18 million. And if you replicate that across all of the assets, like let's assume we can do that. Unlikely, but a lot of the assets, it means that there's a lot of money going in the ground, increases chances of discovery, and that's where the value lies. Again, just sticking with Murphy Lake. So is that kind of basically that's free? You'll end up with 30%. What happens after that point in terms of monetizing that or getting a value on that or getting free carry or whatever you negotiate? Will it be the same each time, or is each
I think
deal
that
different?
You negotiate each property separately, but you use your previous ones as a base case. If you make a second deal on something else that's a much better deal for the earn-in partner, then you've upset your other ones. So I think there is certainly a template that you could look at, which would be close to what we're doing on Murphy Lake.
Right. And then with regards to known data today, you're going into those discussions with data, right? You've got to be able to say, it looks like this. So what have you got today, and how much more work would you need to do on the F4 portfolio to be able to have those conversations?
Right. So the Murphy Lake, if you want to use that as an example, we've drilled there in 2022, in the summer 2022. Yeah, that was F3 uranium. At that point, we didn't have a partner on it. What we've found was very favorable indications and sniffs of uranium that really upgraded that property probably to the top of the line. And that's what attracted, this new partner to come in. I think what you see is partners that are coming in from different commodity sectors where they're struggling to get financing. So their companies are struggling as they come into the uranium space, which is still fundable, and they're able to keep going and raise a bunch of money. And I think that's what you're going to see is it's really non-uranium money coming into the sector that way.
Well, it's been a while since any money sort of came into the sector. It was nice to see this resurgence wherever the money's coming from. So again, the intent with F4 is obviously to have same management team, but effectively, or will there be sort of new people coming in?
It'll be the same technical team. I will be the VP Exploration as well. Our current president, Raymond Ashley, he will be the CEO of F4. And then we're also looking to bring on a president as well.
Okay.
So there'll be a little bit of a change, but
right, and F4 will raise some money because it's going to have it's going to have some G&A cost, a lot of shared G&A cost, but it's also going to do some work. That's the intention here. You're not going to live off of other people or joint venture partner balance sheets and cash, are you?
That's right. We will raise a little bit of money. That's a discussion you can have with Dev.
Okay.
Ultimately, you don't want to have a JV in every single property. When you're tied to these JVs, there's also a little bit of risk in that they're not able to raise the money. That if the sector dries up, the money is going to go to sort of the teams that have greater likelihood of making a find. So yeah, you definitely want to be a little bit diversified too in how you manage each property.
Right. Okay. No, because imagine as a VP of exploration, you're going to want some budget to do some of that, moving things along to enable those conversations. That's, I guess, where it's getting to. But I'll catch up with Devon on that one. So just sticking to the the kind of plan going forward as far as you're concerned. We've got 17 assets at the moment, or more. How do you? Is that enough? Do you plan to do more staking, more exploration? They're going to build up that portfolio. Is that what that vehicle will be?
I think that we've built it up quite well. It's the Athabasca Basin. It's spatially a very small area. You can picture it like a bowl of sand, which is the basin. The center of that is very deep. So as the price of uranium goes up, the staking moves further and further into the basin, and a little bit outside of it. But really, the prime area of real estate is sort of from the margin of the outside of the basin to about, call it 500, 550 meters tops depth. And that's really the realistic depth of where you can actually produce uranium at. And staking opportunities right now are pretty much limited to, how deep into this basin are you willing to go? It's the basin is staked up fairly well right now for anything that I think is remotely prospective. I've actually just recently looked at a map, I think it was from 1978, and the entire basin was staked. So there's precedence in the past for it being much more crazy than it is right now. But I think realistically speaking, staking opportunities are fairly limited to acquire new ground, and companies aren't really letting ground go right now because there's too much risk to let anything go.
Yeah, well, that's what strikes me, because again, people always reference back to the last sort of cycle, or pre Fukushima, and the market going nuts. 500 uranium companies almost overnight from 50 or so. So the frenzy of that time, there's an expectation of a frenzy again. But it seems like are you saying that the good stuff's gone?
I think that most of the good stuff is currently held by people or
Right.
groups. Some of the stuff, there are regular, it's called reopenings. So it's every few months when the province allows reopening of ground that's been lapsed. But in this market, it's good properties aren't being dropped, right? So at this point, it's kind of like, what do you have already going into it? We have a lot of these properties going back a long time. Patterson Lake North, we've had for 20 years. That was owned originally by the original Strathmore, and then it came into Fission Energy, and then it was spun out into Fission 3, and now it's in F3. So a lot of these the prime ground in strategic locations, I think, is fairly well locked down.
Right. And so how many holes have you got there, PLN?
At PLN, we have in total probably around 160 drill holes.
Right.
We're still drilling right now. We're going to continue drilling as long as we see reason to do it, which we still are. At the same time, we acquired a piece of ground on the sort of the southwest corner of Patterson Lake North from Canalaska. We did a property swap. So that is one way you are able to acquire new ground. Another venue is property swaps. So you can kind of look at what you would like and what somebody else has, and then if it makes sense, right? So what we looked at with the Canalaska deal was we had a property called Hobo Lake on the east side. They had the properties on either side of it. So by vending our property into their portfolio, they were really able to connect two of their properties, and we got something adjoining Patterson Lake North. So it worked out really well for both groups.
Right. And in terms of, again, where are you directing the cash? Obviously, JR, you've had success, you continue to have success. With regards to Patterson West and other target zones, how do you kind of allocate capital or drill bits to that?
So we're trying to be strategic about that. Right now, we're focusing with one drill on an area called B1. It's sort of an offset conductor from the A1. And what we're seeing there, which is somewhat unusual, is really widespread alteration. Usually you have a fault, a fairly narrow structure that you're looking for, uranium mineralization inside of that. And outside of that, you have fairly fresh rocks. So on this thing we're drilling right now, what we're seeing is very widespread alteration. So I'm talking 300-400 meters across strike. And that collaborates with the geophysics as well, where we have these really wide conductive zones. And that's been sort of the challenge in there, is identifying something very small and focused inside this very diffuse alteration zone. But what we're seeing, though, is we're still looking for the source of this intense alteration. There's uranium values. There is all the pathfinder elements and clay species you're looking for. Everything is there. The problem is that it's a very big area. It's a very big haystack that we're looking inside of. But we still feel that the potential prize in there is gonna justify continued work there for now.
Right. Okay. And how you guys from money to be able to allow you to do what you want to do there?
So we just closed a $10 million flow through financing. We have about just over 30 million in the bank, and about 10 of that is flow through. So at the current burn rate, I'm trying to reduce the burn rate and make everything as streamlined as possible. And we're trying to get to about probably 1.5 million spend in the field per month. And, that is toned down a little bit. And I think that's sort of a sustainable number to keep going. As long as we keep the drills spinning, that hope is there that you're going to tag into something. At the same time, though, we are also upgrading other parts of the project, like this new chunk we acquired from Alaska. We're going to go in there this winter and do ground geophysics. So it is a bit staged. You have different areas of the property advancing in different, in different stages.
Are you conscious of what's going on in the market in terms of your decision making? Because uranium sort of went on a rip at the end of last year and at the beginning of this year. It's kind of reset itself in the sort of low 80s. There's a bit of price discovery happening there. It's kind of clear that companies like yourself, development companies like yourself, advanced exploration companies like yourself make discoveries and want to make more discoveries. You're going to feed into a certain time frame, which isn't necessarily about getting to production for this cycle. It might be, next cycle, but there's value being created by finding these pounds on the ground. But can you adjust the monthly spend? You talked about $1.5 million, and you're trying to be efficient, refine those costs, etc. But do you constantly review what's going on in the market before you allocate the capital specifically? Because I just think that geologists get quite excited about getting after making these discoveries, but sometimes the kind of commercial imperatives of what the market's doing could be or should be shaping that thought process.
I think that they are in some way. Ultimately, when you make a discovery, you can do it in the headwind of a rising market. But if you look at the last two discoveries, Triple R and Arrow, those were 2012 and 2014 respectively. Those were made in bad markets. I think that a discovery is always a good thing, regardless of when you're making it. If you might be fortunate enough that it's in at the right time, so to speak, and you'll be able to capitalize on it a little bit more. But ultimately, people are owning these stocks as lottery tickets. These are high risk and high reward stocks. And,
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I guess where I was getting at was, but there's so much cash in the bank, you kind of got a form of defense. And it's also a form of offense in the sense that not too many exploration companies have cash in the bank, certainly not that amount. Right. So you are able to kind of move forward at a pace that perhaps others would be envious of. And every time you drill, you're that hopefully one day closer, one step closer to making another discovery. I guess that's where I was getting at. So I'm trying to understand the management's thinking, or certainly discussions that you have.
We have operations in the field, and I don't think that we're going to react in the short term to macro events. The uranium market, things are moving very quickly. It's very volatile. I think the market still reacts well to good news, and that shows you that there's capital there that's just sort of waiting for opportunities to buy into. As an explorer, we make an exploration plan for the next 5-6 months, and we're not in control of the macro. We can't control that. All we can control is what we're doing, and that's finding more uranium. So yeah, we look at the market as a whole, and we might look at, when you're raising money, you try to do it at a strategic point, kind of when you want to raise it versus when you really have to raise it. But ultimately, the events unfold and we explore.
That's how we find the stuff. That's how we find the stuff. Sam, appreciate you coming on today. Nice to meet you, first of all, and nice to hear the kind of how you got here. Bit of it. Drill. What's the next bit of news we can expect to hear out of you guys?
At some point, so the next bit of news will be, of course, the F4. It's finalizing the spin out. So that should be middle of August. I think the court date for that is August 16th, and then it should be finalized August 18th. So at that point, if you're owning the F3 shares, the information of that is in the circular. You'll get your free F4 shares, and we all move on.
Nice. See you then.
Thanks so much.